Just days before his final breath at the age of 86, Neil Sedaka sat at his piano one last time. There was no bitterness in his voice, no dramatic farewell, no list of grievances aimed at the industry that had once crowned him and then quietly erased him. He smiled gently and said, "Good times, good music, and good friends." It sounded simple, but simplicity at the end of a life like his is earned. To the world, he had been the golden boy of American pop, the architect of the bright, hopeful soundtrack that carried the late 1950s into the early 1960s. His melodies felt effortless. His voice felt like sunlight breaking through a post-war sky. But behind those buoyant harmonies lived a far more complicated story. Before the screaming fans and international tours, there was Brooklyn. A small apartment, piano, a child with perfect pitch and relentless discipline. At 9 years old, he was accepted into the preparatory division of Juilliard School. Classical music was supposed to be his destiny. Concert halls, symphonies, prestige. But the strict world of classical performance could not contain his restless imagination. Rock and roll was rising. Pop was exploding. Teenagers wanted songs that sounded like their own hearts. So he walked away from the safety of concert halls and into the humming corridors of the Brill Building. It was less a sanctuary than a factory. Small rooms, upright pianos, young writers stacked on top of each other, racing to produce the next hit. Publishers paced the halls like foremen. Deadlines replaced inspiration. Success was measured in chart positions. Inside that building, Neil partnered with lyricist Howard Greenfield, and together they began shaping the sound of a generation. "Oh Carol" arrived in 1959, playful and irresistible. "Calendar Girl" followed. "Happy Birthday Sweet 16. Breaking Up Is Hard to Do." Each release felt like another brick in a glittering empire. The public saw a flawless hitmaker. The industry saw a dependable revenue stream. He became one of the first American artists to record in multiple languages, singing in Italian, Spanish, German, and Japanese. The applause followed him across oceans. New York, London, Tokyo. Stadiums trembled. And yet, behind the curtain, the pressure tightened. The Brill Building demanded output, not evolution. Executives compared writers, pitted them against each other, reduced artistry to productivity. Contracts favored publishers. Ownership rarely belonged to the creator. He was adored on stage and managed in boardrooms. He was a prince in public and a product in private. Then 1964 arrived. Across the Atlantic, a new sound surged forward. The British invasion. Guitars louder, hair longer, attitudes sharper. The Beatles did not just change radio playlists. They changed the entire cultural climate. Suddenly, the cheerful innocence of early 1960s pop felt outdated. The same executives who had once demanded his style now dismissed it. RCA Records let him go. Phone calls stopped being returned. Meetings evaporated. One year he was selling millions. The next, he could not secure a contract in his own country. The silence after fame is heavier than most people imagine. He did not collapse publicly. He did not wage war in the press. He packed his bags and crossed the ocean. In the United Kingdom and Australia, he played smaller venues. Clubs where glasses clinked louder than applause. Rooms where his past meant little and survival meant everything. The arenas were gone. The work remained. He continued writing. Continued composing for others. Continued proving that talent does not expire simply because trends do. While America looked away, he sharpened his craft in exile. It would have been easy to disappear quietly into nostalgia, to become a footnote in the story of early rock and roll. Instead, an unexpected ally emerged. A young musician who had grown up studying his chord progressions, absorbing his melodic instincts, refusing to forget the architect behind the sound. Elton John saw what executives had ignored. In the early 1970s, Elton signed him to Rocket Record Company. It was not charity. It was recognition. Laughter in the Rain soared to #1. Bad Blood, with Elton on backing vocals, followed. The comeback was not subtle. It was emphatic. The discarded idol stood at the top of the charts once again. proving that the industry's verdict had been premature. The machine that had once ejected him now applauded his resilience. But revenge was never his language. As decades passed, many artists of his era grew bitter, recounting lost royalties and restrictive contracts. Neil carried the memory of betrayal differently, not with denial but with perspective. When he sat at that piano at 86, his voice steady, his hands still fluent across the keys, he did not recount the executives who had dropped him. He did not list grievances about trends or contracts. He spoke about good times, good music, good friends. It was not naive. It was victorious. He had survived the hit factory of the Brill Building, survived cultural irrelevance, survived exile, survived the brutal truth that the entertainment industry can adore you one season and erase you the next. And yet, at the end, he was still there, still playing, still smiling. The greatest rebellion against a system that once treated you as disposable is to outlast it with your joy intact. His story is not simply about charts and comebacks. It is about the fragility of fame and the endurance of craft. For every artist who reclaims the spotlight, countless others fade without a second act. He was one of the rare few who returned stronger, not hardened. When the final notes of his last performance drifted into silence, there was no trace of the young man once discarded by record labels. There was only a seasoned composer who had lived long enough to see trends rise and fall, contracts signed and forgotten, empires built and dissolved. The piano remained. So did the smile. And in that quiet final message, he made something clear without ever saying it directly. The industry may shape careers, but it does not own the soul of the artist. Good times, good music, good friends. In the end, that was the only chart position that mattered.